Uh, Hello student. In today's topic, we shall discuss about what are the software prototyping taxonomies. In a we can design a prototype for a software project in two ways. First of all, why would design a prototype? As we know that the software field is the field where very innovative idea comes, and normally we do in a lot of new fields where the even the developer and the client both are not very much aware of the every prospects and functionalities. So here the client is not very clear about what does he expect, and the developer is not actually understanding the expectation of the customer and the final working project functions. So uh, it would be better if they design a prototype and they make a agreement on whether the prototype is as per their expectations or not. If the prototype is not as per their expectation, they modify it, and this procedure goes on. This has the advantage that the customer, uh, by looking at the prototype or working on the prototype, customer decides what are his actual requirement, and he get out of his confusions. And similarly, the developer get a works on the different functionality, and they get experience of what kind of difficulties that could arise and what would be suitable in this, in the in particular situations. So the prototypes are the necessity where we want to implement a new technology, a new platform, or a new design features or new type of software. So in that situation, it is better to use prototype. So prototypes are of two types: the throwaway prototypes and evolutionary prototype. First, I shall discuss you about the throwaway prototype. The throwaway prototype is the prototype which is developed in the, for the certain critical sections. Here, we do not write down the code as per standard procedure. Here, we simply write down the main functionality of the project module and not the detailed functionalities. And we particularly focus on the functionality which are critical. And for that, when we write the code, we do not write the we do not write the comment statement for every line. Here, we particularly test the functions for most of the cases, and it is not necessary that we check out or find out the error, possible error that could come when we shall run the module. Means it is not 100% error proof. There could be some error, but in most of the situation, this will work. So in throwaway prototyping, when we design our coding, this is called the quick designing, sometimes the dirty coding. In this coding, while writing the codes, we do not write statement or comment statement with every line logic. And the developer focus on the key functionalities, and while writing these keys function, he ignores some of the specifications which are required in the final model. So keeping in mind the final complicated critical section, he write down the code, and he does not code. And besides this, there is also difference that it does not check out the corresponding code for well-defined cases. And if it is true for most of the cases, then it is expected. Here, this type of programming is called dirty programming. The most common approach that are used for quick designing are the writing a preliminary SRS, implementing the prototype based on those requirements, and achieving user experience with the prototypes. And then we write the SRS and then the final product. Here, for building this type of prototype, one condition is very necessary, that we should deliver it in a certain time. If and because of which we are using the quick programming or dirty programming, yes, you may write dirty coding style, because we want to deliver a prototype to the customer within time so that he can test it and validate it, so that we can get the actual requirement and what are the missing in the current model. So it is very strict and uh, time bounded prototype. For writing this, we just write the preliminary SRS. Means we write down the basic requirements which are clear to us, and by focusing on that, we design a prototype. When this prototype is passed to the client, he the check out this prototype, and he may add some new requirements to it. On when the final prototype is validated by the client, we write down the detailed requirements, on basis of which we write down the SRS for the final project. And on the basis of this SRS, we develop the real product. Okay. So this kind of coding that we use in dirty programming cannot be reused. Means the once we write what the code we write while designing the thrown away prototype, it cannot be used for final project. So we have to rewrite all the code once again for the final project. So it happens that many of the company feel this process is very exhausting and time consuming. So many company says that this is not very fruitful for them, but it is not actually so. In there are certain conditions which are necessary for this type of prototyping. I shall discuss it later. First, shall discuss you about the evolutionary prototype. In this approach, the prototype is built with the idea that it will eventually be converted into the final system. In evolutionary programming, it is like when in the winter, the fog covers our view, then in that situation, it is not easy for anybody to clearly see through the fog. Then in that situations, normally what we do, we drive slowly and we move to the extent where we can clearly visualize the physical items. And when we proceed, we can see the to the few more meter to a some more extent, and like this, while driving slowly, we keep on moving. The same concept is used in the evolutionary prototyping. In evolutionary prototyping, the idea is that out of, suppose there are many more requirements, out of which some are not clear and confusing, and even the client is not clear about it, what he actually expects. In that situation, we starts with the set of requirements about which we are clear, and we construct a part of the final project, and this part of the project is rectified and modified as per the client feedback, and is by each iteration with the corresponding feedback from the client, this prototype is enhanced to become the final project. So this is the prototyping, in which the prototype finally evolve as a final project. So in this prototyping, we do not use the uh, dirty programming concept, but we use a standard programming coding style, in which we write comment statement along with every codes. We write down the logic behind the code in simple language. In this, what we do, we uh, once we write the requirement, then we design. After that, we code and test and deploy. After when we deploy, the customer find out few more mistakes and error, and he recommends some more modifications. On the recommendation of the client, we redo the requirement, redesign, recode, retest, and redeploy. This these steps are iteratively implement, that are redo the requirement, redesign, recode, retest, and redeploy. So this procedure continues until it is approved by the client. Okay. So in this way, number of prototypes are developed. So if there is prototype 1, prototype 2, and so on up to final prototype. In this, we are sure about it, that if there is a IA plus 1th prototype, then it will meet the user requirement that have already been used or served in the version I or prototype I, because it is the evolved version of the version I. So evolutionary prototype use standard programming, and in this the test cases are well defined, and we remove every possible error into the prototype. Okay. This is a table which compares these two prototyping techniques. Just take a look. The difference between these two approaches are: first, the development approach. In throwaway prototyping, we use dirty programming and quick designing. In it, there is no rigorous effort for finding out the error. So in dirty programming, we do not write the comment statement, we do not design particular test cases, and we do not try very hard to remove all the possible function error in the functions and implement every function. But in evolutionary, we cannot accept any kind of error within the module that we have partially designed, and we design proper planning and write down the every possible test cases for the final project. Second, what to build. In throwaway prototyping, we only build a particular part or critical section of the final project. We just focus on a critical section and we try to implement that function only. We pay least attention to the rest of the part, and we try to implement that critical portion only. While in evolutionary model, we build understood part of the first. We start with the parts which we understand well, and then we that is that becomes the foundation of the project, and we keep on iteratively upgrading this prototype to make it as a final project. Design driver: optimize development time. uh, in throwaway prototype, there is a pressure that we have to deliver a fast prototype within time so that the customer can give his feedback, and so that the developer and the client can well understand their requirement and they start working on. If we create delay in designing the prototype, it will be of no use. And next, in evolutionary model, the optimized modifiability. In We try to modify the portion, and we try to do it in the most optimized way. Then ultimate goal. Finally, the throwaway prototyping code is of no use, and we need to re-engineer or redesign the code for the final project. But in evolutionary prototyping, we can evolve from the code that has already designed in level I to get the prototype at level I plus 1. Prototyping pitfalls. Many of the organization complains that this technique is not very efficient one, and they try to avoid prototyping concept. Prototyping can have execution inefficiency with the associated tool, and this may be a negative aspect of the prototyping. But actually, when we uh, seriously implement this technique for the critical section, this is very useful technique. So the company which complains about that, uh, they need, for the prototyping, they need training, efficiency, applicability, behavior, which can be negative factor for the software prototyping. But there are lots of conditions in which the prototyping is a better choice. For example, uh, the benefit of software prototyping are obvious, and these complaints are not uh, much uh, much valuable. As in this, the idea, when there is a project or module which is designed in a certain language, and we try to implement that software into a new language, it is not an easy task, because for the developer, the new language is a challenge, and there is a limitation that we can actually convert one by one the same code into the another language. And here we can say that there is a limit or threshold that exists where this is cannot be supported. So for every software, there is a lifespan of software system that justifies the system would be better maintained after being re-engineered in this technology, because the advantage, we cannot modify every portion of project that is written in an older language into a new language as it is, because it would be better to instead of modifying each portion or module one by one, to then to re-engineer the complete code in another language, because total engineering should be planned in that situation. But there are some time when there is a particular critical sections which we try to implement into the new language or in a new design. Then this is called the minimum prototyping technology. Prototyping technology can be used on critical section only. This minimal approach could be used as a mean to transition an organization to total engineering, re-engineering. This can be done step by step also. And similarly, software prototyping must be integrated within organization through training, case studies, and library development. So you cannot say that a software prototyping can be implemented just by the without any training or case studies and library development. So you need proper training and case studies and a proper library development through which the user can implement that critical section and build a prototype for that. In situation where this full range of commitment to the technology is lacking and only developer training is provided, and there is no library development or case studies, then this technique does not give you expected results. And after and they complain about the prototyping and they move back to the previous system and they feel difficult to transition this transition. But for the proper way of transition, we need proper training, case studies, and library development. So the end user involvement becomes enhanced when change in requirement can be prototyped and agreed to before any development proceed. This is the obvious example that when we try to build a prototype before the delivering the final product, we can well understand and get an change in requirement or modified requirements in early stage, and because of which the development of the actual system or even later, this helps in development of the actual system and in maintenance also, because we can modify the possible error in a very early stage, and this will need this will save our time also and money effort also. So the prototyping concept is enhanced, but there are conditions which should be satisfied for using the different prototyping techniques as thrown away prototyping and evolutionary prototyping. So that's all about the software prototyping.